So a couple of days ago, I saw a post on Facebook saying that it was 13 years to that day since the Doctor Who episode Closing Time aired. And it reminded me that whilst that episode is incredibly unpopular, very lowly rated by the fans, I actually really like the first two acts of the story, the first half an hour, 35 minutes. And I actually find it to be some of the best stuff of Series 6 and some of the best stuff of the 11th Doctor's era. And then we get to the third act, and it takes a absolute, incredibly huge shit on that amazing first 35 minutes and craps all over it, smothering it in shit, and basically becomes unsalvageable. So that reputation the episode has is basically cemented because of the shitty third act. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to this video where I discuss the problems with the climax to the Doctor Who Series 6 or Season 32, Episode 12, Closing Time. Before we start, a few pointers out of the way. Firstly, I will not be covering the scenes at the very end where the Doctor is talking to the children or the river song being captured by Madame Turf scene, because those scenes are more tied in with the next episode, and I believe at the very least the river song being captured by the silence scene is more of a Stephen Moffat written scene rather than the writer of this episode, which comes to my second point in a second. But at the very least, that final scene with river song is written by Stephen Moffat. So that scene, as well as the scene with the children prior to that, and also the scene before that with Craig and the Stetson and Sophie coming back, that's exempt. So everything from the Doctor getting his Stetson and the envelopes to the end is exempt from this discussion. It's only from when the Doctor leaves the house to when he and Craig are talking with Linda Barron's character afterwards. Second point, this episode is unfortunately written by somebody who we at the Whoniversals do not like anymore, wouldn't I say anymore, for nearly 7 years at this point. And that is, of course, and I apologise for bringing him up, but because he's the writer of the episode, it's a bit unfortunate and can't really get away from it that much. I'll try not to as we go along, but I definitely have to say it now, so you know who I'm talking about, and then try not to afterwards. Okay, it is Gareth Roberts. Yeah. So apologies for mentioning him and referring to him in this video. Try not to mention him by name as much. I'll do the Mr. TARDIS way of saying A.T. Erif to refer to him, like I did to another person in this episode just now. Finally, I have done a review of this episode on my Retro YouTube channel, which you can go and check out to hear my full thoughts on the episode. So you can go and check that out on why I really like the first two-thirds, as well as also ranting on the crap that is the third act of this episode. But to summarise it, I actually really enjoyed watching Closing Time the last time I saw it a couple of years ago. Thought it was actually quite a sweet episode. Yeah, a sequel to The Lodger probably wasn't what everybody was wanting, very few probably. And the idea of Doctor and Craig having another adventure where they're kind of doing more mundane slice of life stuff, it's not a bad idea, but I don't know if anybody was really wanting it. Like, The Lodger was like one-time deal based on a comic strip from a few years ago brought to TV. It's a good idea to give it a try. With this one, it's a choice. What this episode has going over The Lodger is threefold. Firstly, it's got the Cybermen in it, which is a major step up. Secondly, it's also at the end of Series 6, after the Doctor's dropped off Amy and Rory due to how dangerous it's getting for them, see the God Complex, and just before his supposed inevitable death in The Wedding of River Song. And finally, it's not just a redo of The Lodger, we move things along with Craig's life as he is now a dad. Not necessarily married to Sophie, I think they confirm they aren't at the end, but who knows. Well, the writer, obviously. But they have a baby and they've moved house, and things and time has passed since the events of the last story for both characters, and it actually provides some pretty good emotional moments. Also, because Craig knows the Doctor, they're on a bit more in level ground in terms of knowing each other, rather than the Lodger, where they were kind of at odds with each other for a bit. Well, Craig was at odds with the Doctor, but yes, they're on a bit more of a level pegging field this time. Also, this episode has Storm again, Dark Lord of All. Who doesn't love Stormy? He's definitely a better child actor than that kid in Almost People. And he's a baby. Or babies. But yeah, because of the Doctor and Craig's relationship throughout the episode, I actually really cared about them and really liked their dynamic and enjoyed their banter, their good friend moments, and even seeing them have a little bit of an argument here and there, but different from when we saw at the Lodger where Craig was getting jealous of the Doctor, rather than this time around it's more of, well, I suppose he kind of is here as well, but for different reasons why he's jealous of the Doctor. Like, everybody loves him. Actually, no, that is kind of the same. Okay, so maybe it is retreading a couple of old ground, but it's done in a slightly different way of like how the Doctor's able to shh people and they actually go quiet, as opposed to just being incredibly charming and basically winning people over by just being there. Not that that's absent from this episode, of course. Everybody kind of just loves the Doctor in these two episodes. He's just like that guy if you put him in a present-day setting, and he's just kind of like that. The writer's final episode for the show, The Caretaker in Series 8, also kind of showed this to a lesser extent, but that one had the established companion Clara Oswald in the Craig shoes, and Danny Pink also getting a bit more into the story. So Clara and Danny kind of shared the Craig role in that story, with Clara in the more of the Closing Time Craig and Danny in the more the Lodger Craig. But the dynamic between those characters and the 12th Doctor is a lot different to the 11th Doctor Craig in the Lodger, also Sophie. For the first half an hour, give or take, the episode's actually pretty damn sweet, really nice, cleverly building up the Cybermen. I kind of guessed that they were coming from underground, but when I first saw it, or at least I thought that might be the case, as opposed to a ship, but it's pretty clever how they're building it up. The Cybermat is pretty cool, and Linda Barron's back for a really nice cameo. Yes, she doesn't get to do as much as she did when she played Captain Rack in Enlightenment in 1983, which is her best role of the show. Although I think that her character here is also better than the singing character in The Gunfighters. But yeah, I think Val, I believe her name is really lovely. The other supporting casts aren't really much to write home about, but they're decent for the small roles they're in. The episode is mostly about the Doctor and his relationship with Craig and Stormageddon, as well as his impact on those around him. And there's that really nice scene just at the very end of this half-hour period that I mentioned, where the Doctor basically laments on his life and admits that his time is running out, which is what we see in the Series 6 Part 2 trailers that they showed, and which is nicely leading up into the finale. We also had that pretty cool action sequence where the Doctor saves Craig and Alfie from the Cybermat, who turns out not to be deactivated, but has woken up and tries to attack them. So yeah, there's some pretty cool scenes and some good building of tension with the Cybermen as well, stalking George as well. George, the security guy. So the first half an hour, the first two acts are pretty damn brilliant. Some really strong stuff. If the whole episode was like this, it'd probably be an instant 9 out of 10, in my opinion, at least. But then we get to the third act. And the third act, I think, at best, is a 3, maybe even 2. Well, what happens? What the fuck happens? Right. So, after the Doctor leaves the house and Craig then finds a note of him saying he has left the house, the Doctor then goes to see Val at the shop and is wondering where the Cybermen have come from and starts investigating into the changing rooms. All fine so far, by the way. He discovers that the base is underground and as I predicted, I believe at the time, or theorized, and goes down into the tunnels, and that's how that first victim got taken at the start of the episode. One of the staff members, she was in the changing room, and the Cyberman was there. And so instead of using teleportation into the changing rooms, it's actually from behind one of the mirrors in the changing room. This is a really good idea. By the way, the story set at a department store shop, I forgot to mention. It's really good, and the Doctor's been working there in the toy section as undercover after noticing some weird stuff with the electricity, which is supposedly the council sticking in whole bunch of new wires, which is how the Cybermen got revived. How they were able to survive, to hide underground all this time prior to the new electrical cables being put in is uncertain. You would have thought maybe the first time they were putting electrical cables or water or gas pipes in, they would have been woken up. Well, maybe because of the electricity, but the first time, or telephone wires or something. Anyway, Craig goes to the department store and gives Alfie to Val to look after before chasing after the Doctor into the changing rooms and down to the tunnels. And it's when we get to the spaceship is where things start going down. Is the Doctor is in the spaceship, the underground crashed spaceship. I'm not sure how that happened. It's implied these Cybermen are the Mondasian Cybermen, but with the 2006 design, so 2006 Cybermen design, but the change of chest piece that was introduced in A Good Man Goes to War. It's implied it's supposed to be Cybermen from Mondas, like in the classic series, but with a similar design to the Cybermen, and hence why they are theorized to team up in Nightmare and Silver in the next series to then create the new breed of Cybermen. So we see Cybermen of both designs. Also, Blood of the Cybermen featured a different design of Cyberman on their chest piece. Perhaps Mondasian, perhaps Cybermen. So it's theoretically possible all of the Matt Smith era Cybermen, besides some from Nightmare and Silver, were from Mondas rather than the parallel Earth, as seen in the 10th Doctor's era. When these designs reappear in the 12th and 13th Doctor's eras, it's a little less certain. It might be a bit of both. It might be more Cybus, it might be more Mondasian, might be one or the other. One might be one might be the other. Anyway, back to this episode. The Doctor finds George's badge amongst all the Cyber stuff, and one of the Cybermen, there turns out to be only about 6 of them, and they're converting people that they've kidnapped down. The souls of the survivors of the crash have been, or the Cybernats have been converting the captured humans and turning them into Cybermen, such as George and I believe Shona, the woman from the start. So they confront the Doctor, and the Doctor gets captured really easily. I'm not sure how exactly, but he gets captured easily. And they consider turning him into the Cyber Controller, which they then reject because of his Time Lord mind. Something that would change for the Cybermen by the time of the next story to make him the Cyber Planner, aka Mr. Clever. So yeah, the Doctor gets captured really easily by some of the most primitive modern Cybermen of the show. Probably the most primitive modern Cybermen outside of those first few Rise of the Cybermen Cybermen. Actually, even more so than those first few Rise of the Cybermen that got upgraded in that story. And yeah, it's a bit awkward for the Doctor, but it's not what kind of tarnishes the story. What happens next is that Craig goes down trying to be brave with this sort of scanner that we use in shops to scan barcodes and stuff. He goes down to try and basically confront the Cybermen to let the Doctor go and basically act all smart and clever because he's been hanging out with the Doctor. But the Cybermen zap the thing away, not even close up. It's like they can do it from a distance now. And then they capture Craig and put him in the Cyber Controller suit and then try to upgrade him into a Cyber Controller. Oh. Well, actually, it's good at building the suspense on how on earth is Craig going to escape. How is he going to survive? Whilst the Doctor's basically pleading for his life and then trying to encourage Craig to keep the emotions. But once that helmet goes down, by the way, it's a plain old helmet, not a Cyber Controller helmet or even a Cyber Leader one. But plain old helmet over Craig's face, and it's starting to convert him. So it looks like Craig's dead, and this could have been the push that caused the 11th Doctor to realise perhaps it is now time to call it a day. Like when he was told about the Brigadier's death in the next episode would be like, maybe this, as Mr. TARDIS said in his review in 2011, maybe this could be what makes him realise, okay, I really do need to face this, I need to stop, and I need to face my death now. Much like the Brigadier phone call in the next episode sort of does, but this one could be a bit more of a personal guilt, as opposed to a realisation of time catching up with him. Or, if you're going to go with Craig surviving, don't have the cyber helmet go over his face, because then that implies it's starting to convert him, and you can hear the electronical stuff from the cyber conversions of the revival starting to work. But then, Alfie, Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All, Craig's baby, starts crying, and the Cybermen have got the security camera on the perfume section where Val is, and looking after Alfie. Alfie's crying, as a baby would do, presumably missing his dad. And then that somehow causes Craig's emotions as a dad hearing his baby son crying to override the Cybermen's conversion. That's not how cyber conversion works. If Craig was that far gone, a baby crying and him resisting probably wouldn't have worked. As I mentioned, if they hadn't closed up the cyber head by that point, maybe he would have had a bit more of a chance. But by the time they are already starting to physically on the inside changing him, as well as delete the emotions. Torchwood, episode 4 of series 1, Cyberwoman, kind of was basically the emphasis of that, because it was showing a part converted Lisa, but her mind was already changed and mostly converted to being a Cyberman, or Cyberwoman in her case. But there was memories of her past with Yanto, but she was also partially converted into a Cyberman, mentally as well as physically. And that even goes true for when she swaps the brain out with the poor pizza delivery girl. That poor pizza delivery girl, she did deserve that. But yes, Torchwood Cyberwoman was basically the point of that episode, besides showing off a woman in scantily clad cyber person clothing, for whatever reason. Production team thought it was funny. It was 2005, 2006. It was a different time. Oh, am I kidding? They'd probably do it now. The point was that one of the points of the episode, story-wise, was you can't bring back a person from cyber conversion, even if there were small breakthroughs, like Yvonne still having a bit of personality within her, but she was still converted to Cyberman, or Miss Hartigan still retaining some personality when she was a Cyberman. I mean, you could still retain some of who you were, but as they say, reversing the conversion, not possible. You've got to get them out whilst they're in the conversion chamber before things get finalised, as seen with Little in Attack of the Cybermen, when the Doctor's trying to get him out before they finish the conversion. In the slowest cyber conversions ever, by the way, in that story. Not sure what's going on there. But in Closing Time, Craig's got all of the stuff on, and he's mostly in his suit. And the emotion should have been taken away now, as the physical upgrading is starting. But then once the mask reopens after Craig resists, he's fine, he's normal, he's still got his emotions, nothing's physically changed, and he's able to break out of the suit. And then once he's out, and the Doctor is free as well, the crying of the baby then causes the Cybermen's emotional inhibitors to ramp up to then later explode them and the spaceship. Just like how the emotional inhibitor number from Age of Steel was used to give the Cybermen in that story back their emotions, which ended up killing them and causing them to explode and the base to blow up, etc. So it's basically ripping off the ending of the Age of Steel but terribly. It's trying to say a baby crying and a dad trying to go and help his baby son when he hears him crying, basically causes this small group of Cybermen to blow up and die. This ending is so rushed, so poorly thought out. Oh, and the Cybermats that the Doctor has taken to use to try and drain the Cybermen system get stomped on by a Cyberman. So that makes the Cybermats' role in the finale nil plopper, as the Ninth Doctor would say. Yeah, it had a role earlier on in the story helping out with the Cybermen, but at the end, yeah, fuck it. It's going to be a big seller at Christmas when we release the toy. But as for in the actual episode, no. And this is the last time we see a Cybermat in the entire TV series. Go check out Will Maddox's video about that to learn more about the Cybermats. But yeah, whilst it's used really well in the first 2/3 of the episode, in the finale, it's just squashed. The ending really didn't have enough time to cook. We had so much time with the build-up, and I loved that build-up. But maybe taking off a couple of minutes from that first half an hour could have maybe helped stretch this finale out a bit more, or fine-tuned it, or fix it up a little bit. And then we've still got like 5 minutes at the end, as well as to do the calm down with Craig getting Stormy back, Alfie the baby. The Doctor having some interactions with Val and the other shop assistant lady as well. And then the things I mentioned earlier that I wasn't going to include as part of this tour, because that's more tied in with the next episode, with the Doctor getting his Stetson and blue envelopes, the children's scene, and then the final scene with River Song, which that scene at the very least is probably written by Stephen Moffat, so that has nothing to do with this episode. The plot of this episode. So because we've got those final couple minutes for the episode to wind down, smooth out, and then link into the next episode, plus that epilogue that basically directly ties in with that next episode. Because we've got that at the very end, we got to really rush through this finale in less than 10 minutes. And it so shows it. This is one of the most poorly put together endings in a Doctor Who episode, along with the Power of Three. But at least that episode didn't shit on the Cybermen like this one does. And it was just a really rushed last minute ending after a lot of production difficulties. Sadly, Power of Three, whilst that also has a really good build up of that episode, the ending kind of falls flat. The difference is the ending of that episode doesn't take a massive big shit on the stuff that was leading up to it, because it's still within line of the stuff that led up to it. It's just a really rushed and poorly put together final act. This one, on the other hand, takes a huge shit, as I mentioned earlier, on that first half an hour of almost pure gold. Whether you want to say what you like about the Doctor and Craig relationships and doing a sequel to The Lodger, or what you like about the writer as a person, separate to this episode because of what they've said. But take those aside, and the first even detractors of the first half hour who aren't really keen on that part of the story either can at least agree that even that deserves better than what we got here. This ending fucking sucks. It's so terrible. It's so rushed. I don't want to be too cruel on the production team, because they obviously did the best of what they could with the story provided. But considering how much good stuff was shown earlier, and also with the final few minutes as well, it's an incredibly badly put together. It's a rush production for the execution, and the script does it hardly any favours. I don't know what the writer or Stephen Moffat, the executive producer, were thinking with this ending. Were they even trying to provide a good, satisfactory ending to this otherwise pretty damn brilliant story? Were they actually trying to do a good Cyberman story? Considering that they do the Cybermen every 12th episode in the Moffat era, they appear either whether that's a cameo or as the main villain or a main villain in every episode 12 of the series. In terms of the Cybermen stories from the Moffat era, this one should have been the best, besides the Series 10 finale, of course, and also the Pandora Copen's Big Bang. But unfortunately, because of this shit ending, it's possibly the weakest. I mean, actually, no, I would still take it above the Series 8 finale. But Nightmare in Silver, I actually think, is probably better overall, because that one didn't have an awesome build-up and a shit ending. It was kind of just meh. Not great all the way through. This one starts off amazing, in my opinion. I know others will disagree. But to quote Jeff Goldblum's character from Jurassic Park, that is one great big pile of shit, which was then dumped on the ending. It was so badly written, so badly rushed, so badly executed. It's just poor. I didn't say piss poor, but that implies that there's salvage. No, it's shit. And unfortunately, it solidifies the reputation Closing Time now has, not helped by the writer's comments on a certain topic that we will not mention. Otherwise, Closing Time might have had a bit more of a better reputation, or at the very least on par with The Lodger, which is just seen as meh, which I agree, it's fine. It's alright, it's enjoyable, but it's kind of just there, which is sort of the problem with doing Doctor Who slice of life stories. It's probably not going to be the most well-received story unless you do an incredibly good job with it. But most of them aren't really held up really well unless there's some more sci-fi elements included. By the way, there's a difference between slice of life and like soap drama-esque elements, or bringing in real life elements into the show that Russell T Davies did back in series 1, etc., etc. There's a difference between bringing in real world life elements, slice of life elements, and a episode where the Doctor's on Earth kind of just living and hanging out like a human, doing human jobs, etc. There's a bit of a difference. That's what I'm talking about here. And unfortunately, because of this ending, Closing Time's reputation it's kind of sunk. Because of this ending, because of the terrible resolution, no one cares about the good stuff that came before, or they don't quite get on board with it as much. And then with the ending, other fans will consider it a terrible episode. And whilst it's a bit unfair for the whole episode, but I can't really say they're wrong when it comes to the climax. This climax fucking sucks. I passed Closing Time as a 6 out of 10 in my review, but my god, I wanted to give it a 9 with the first half, but the ending alone would be like a 2. It is so... No, it'd probably actually be a 1. Mediocre episode overall. Fantastic first half an hour. Awful shit. Wasted. And outright rushed. Third act, besides the scenes tying in with the next episode. And that's why the ending to Closing Time sucks and drags the entire episode down. Otherwise, it could honestly be a diamond in the rough, a hidden gem that maybe some people don't get into. Or heck, maybe it would actually be more popular if it had a better ending. Who knows? Who fucking knows? Oh, I just hope that the writer is proud of himself. And despite the Series 7 endings not quite being so great generally, I hope the production team at least learned from this episode how not to end a story, how not to treat the Cybermen, how not to treat characters like Craig, how not to treat a story like how the story was in the first half hour, how not to end an episode, and how not to be shit. There are worse episodes out there, there are a lot worse, but when it comes to the final climax of a story, it's very possible that Closing Time has the worst, or at least one of the worst. May it hopefully get some fans for earlier on in the episode, like myself, in the future. Maybe it gets a bit more recognition later down the line, but as for this fucking piss-take excuse of a climax, to quote Mr. TARDIS, get in the bin. Which is what the writer should also do. Fuck this ending. That is why, in my opinion, Closing Time's climax is the worst climax to a Doctor Who episode. Why it shits on what could have been a amazing one, and why the episode probably has a worse reputation than it probably should. Although, because of this shit ending, it probably deserves said reputation. Well, almost at least. Yeah. That's it from me. Sorry if this was a bit of a long one, and sorry if it was a bit of a shouty, cross one. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time for something a bit more positive. Hopefully. Goodbye.